smart people are back at the ranch, you're stuck with me. We've heard a lot about really how countries all over the world are dealing with the issues of aging. And certainly one of our panelists, Japan, is certainly the poster child of who we all look to. But even in the U.S., 14% of our population is deemed elderly. But that will more than double by 2050 to 80 million. And at that point, almost 20%, 1 in 5 Americans will be elderly. The older I get, I'm not sure what I think that term means, but we saw quite a few numbers, but I was really struck by these. According to the World Health Organization, they estimate that 47 million people today, globally, are living with dementia. But take a look at this, if you want to talk scary. By 2050, that is going to be 132 million. And it almost doubles every 20 years. We've heard a lot about it, but when you think about numbers globally, I was pretty shocked by seeing these. At the same time, this is going to add up to a lot of money. In fact, in 2011, it was about $183 billion for hospice and long-term care. But that's nothing compared to how that grows exponentially. By 2030, look at those numbers, $2 trillion. As someone said yesterday, numbers that have T's in them get my attention. So, when we think about this, even today, what does it mean in America? One study found by asking people who work for corporations, it was estimated that 6.6 million folks were being touched by this. And for a lot of us, as we've heard, that means dealing, in my case, with my in-laws, with many of you, with your parents. And so this is creating a heightened awareness of the issue. But in fact, about 5% of the workforce today is dealing with this on some regular basis. We've heard a lot this morning about will people be making bad financial decisions, either of their own accord because of diminished capacity, or because they're getting some help, perhaps not the best help, from someone else who has malicious intent. But what I want you to think about is, where is the money? And why is this a bigger issue when you look at the numbers than we've even talked about so far? This was a study done by my folks. It's their projection of how assets will grow and who will have them. So what you see is that in 2010, when they did this, they estimate that pre-retirees then had about 6.1 trillion of America's wealth, 5.9 in the hands of retirees. So in essence, people between 55 and older had about 56% by our estimates of U.S. wealth. But they fast forward to 2020. And again, based on their calculations, they believe those numbers rise rather significantly, that 65% of the assets will be in the hands of folks 55 and over. So this is where the money is. While there's a lot of marketing emphasis on the millennials, in fact, where's the money? It's in the hands of people who are older. But we are about to see a seismic shift. Looking at our numbers slightly differently and thinking about how this plays out, our estimates using some government calculations are by 2023, half of the money will be in the hands of retirees. So this is a seismic event. This would be the first time in history that more assets would be, or half the assets would be in the hands of those who are retired. Now, I think yesterday we saw a theoretical diagram of how people spend in their lifetime and how they earn. But people aren't thinking enough about what's the economic outcome of this. Today we know that, in fact, people 55 and older are spending more of the money. But what will they do in retirement? Will they spend less, and what are the impacts on even the economy? So this really puts an exclamation point about, I think, a lot of the discussion that we've had the last 2 days. And as you think about people retiring, how will they and who will help them with these decisions, and will they make good ones? I think yesterday, if you're certainly our colleague, professor from Wharton, indicated under the best circumstances, it is very difficult to know how much money to take out. With diminished capacity, how will those dollars come out? Now, we've also seen a lot of numbers, no problem. We've seen a lot of numbers about what are people worried about in retirement. In the research area, how you ask the questions certainly impacts the outcomes. But we put our questions with a little bit more of a financial bent. And no matter how we ask the questions, money for a comfortable retirement is always way up there, if not number one on the list. But as a couple of speakers have pointed out, when we ask them and we dig a little deeper, paying for long-term care, number 2. Paying medical expenses, number 3. So in fact, if you looked over the last decade, you would see these issues around health care, long-term care, have in fact been coming up the list. In fact, this is a study, and I know it's hard to see, so I'll try to take you through it. On the far left, we asked these same questions in 2006. The second bar, which is going to be very hard to see, is 2012. And the third bar is 2013. And what you do see is that 31% of people in 2006 were suggesting they had a real concern about long-term care. In fact, by 2012, that was up to 38%. And very unusual, even from 12 to 13, it went from 38 to 43. And it's unusual to see that much movement. But I think personally, I can't prove this with research, that as more of us are seeing this, as more of us are dealing with it, especially those in the 50 and above, because of dealing with elderly parents, the noise around it, the personal, I need to be worried about that, is certainly rising and clearly affecting awareness. Now, when you look at that data, one would probably estimate that the insurance industry must be selling far more long-term care coverages. Would that be a fair thing to surmise? It would be, but in fact it's quite the opposite. Individual long-term care, the number of buyers is the dark blue, and that has been declining precipitously. And in fact, to very, very low numbers as of 15, and thus far, it's even declined further in 16. In the lighter blue, that is dealing with premium, and that's gone from 716 down to 261. So you can see from 04 to 15, it's declined. Now, you would say, Bob, this makes no sense. Why? Very complex issues. Trying to sum it up. Number one, from the perspective of the buyer, premiums have been rising. so they would say it's not as affordable. From the carrier's perspective, the early policies that were sold were very rich benefits. And based on history and real claims, a lot of reasons why you've been talking about for the last 2 days, the claims far outpaced what the carriers thought they would have, and that's why premiums have increased. However, those premium increases need to go through state regulators, many of whom are either appointed by or elected, and if they're appointed, it's often by the governor. So they aren't real pleased about getting all those phone calls from people who are having rising claims, the premiums from the claims. In the end, what that's done is carriers have had to cut back, clients have thought it's not as affordable, but the good news, and you're going to hear about that, is companies are beginning to adapt. And so one of the ways we're seeing companies adapt to fill this need is providing on standard life insurance policies riders. Riders that provide long-term care coverage to fill that void that exists. What our research suggests is people love products that offer multiple solutions, so that I can buy life insurance and at the same time get some long-term care coverage is seen in a very positive way. And you can see that the increase in sales, both new premium and new policies, and I want you to look at the new policies, if you can see it, in 14 took a really big spike. And so this is really an emerging area where more people are focusing and looking at these as being viable solutions. So this is one of many things. The other thing that we're seeing is new types of long-term care products that have different types of benefits that are also more affordable. So as you think today about the financial services industry, yes, you might not be thinking about life insurance and long-term care as being in the same set of words, but in fact, those are providing solutions. But insurance companies through annuities are really helping people save systematically for retirement. We've talked about long-term care, both standalone and as riders. And down in the right, what you'll hear from our Japanese speaker is how also insurance companies are beginning to fill gaps. Gaps with Medicare coverage, gaps with critical illness, where there are really those big bills that come in, that there are gaps in what the standard coverage might provide. So these are emerging areas. In the upper right, you see deaccumulation, and certainly this gets to what our professor from Wharton spoke about yesterday. A deferred annuity. In her case, she was very, very interested in not taking the money immediately, but letting it sit there so that it takes care of the backside when people would normally begin to run out of money. So nothing can create the stream of income that an annuity can, and that is why that also is part of the solution, because people are going to need a certainty. When they do retire, how will that stream of income be there so that I can pay for all of those various costs and guaranteeing that I can have a reasonable lifestyle? And we do think that one of the outcomes in some of our research we see of the downturn. Think about somebody who retired 3 days before Lehman went down, and watch their assets, their life savings, go from where it was over a lifetime to perhaps depleted by 30 to 70%, depending where they work. So people are very concerned about guarantees. And what all of our research suggests is people want guarantees. They want certainty. They want products that will tell them these things will be covered. They want guaranteed income. So the balance of our discussion, our panelists will talk about some of the creative things that insurance companies are doing to help with the crisis, but also to look at how to make positive gains to people's lives.